The report landed on Kenji Tanaka's desk with a quiet thud, its stark white cover a stark contrast to the polished mahogany of his office at the Asahi Shimbun. For over 3 decades, Kenji had been the paper's senior economics editor, a sentinel watching the currents of global commerce from his high-rise perch in central Tokyo. His world was one of numbers, of GDP growth and stock market fluctuations, of the cold, hard logic that had rebuilt Japan and defined its place in the world. And in that world, America was a known quantity, a military and economic behemoth, a land of Hollywood blockbusters and fast food chains, but culturally, a force whose true, deep influence had, in his view, long since peaked. To Kenji, the America that mattered was the one of the post-war era, the one that had shown Japan the path to industrial might. He remembered a time when Made in the USA was a mark of unparalleled quality, a symbol of the efficiency and raw power that Japan had meticulously studied and, eventually, surpassed. In his mind, America was pragmatic, loud, and relentlessly commercial, but it lacked the subtle, refined, soft power that could truly capture the soul of another nation. It had energy, yes, but it had long lost the power to genuinely shift the world's cultural tides. This conviction was etched into the very foundation of his professional identity. That was why the report before him felt like a misprint, a statistical anomaly that had somehow slipped through the cracks. He ran a finger down the first column of figures, his brow furrowed in disbelief. The number of young Japanese people enrolling in conversational American English courses, not for business, but for culture, had surged by 300% in a single year. The usage of American slang terms like awesome, keep it real, and that's cool was exploding on social media among teenagers. High schools across the country were reporting unprecedented demand for elective courses on American literature and the history of rock and roll. Was this a fleeting trend or the first tremor of a seismic societal shift? The question hung in the quiet, air-conditioned space of his office. Aiko Sato, a young reporter whose digital fluency often left Kenji feeling like a relic, held out her smartphone. On the screen, a viral video showed a group of high school students in Osaka, gathered in a park, performing an impromptu slam poetry piece in a mixture of Japanese and impassioned, idiomatic English. The video had tens of millions of views. Kenji scrolled through the comments, his skepticism warring with the evidence. There's a kind of honesty in their voices you don't hear in Japanese, one comment read. Another said, American culture feels liberating. It lets you be yourself. The English language, it seemed, was beginning to permeate their lives, moving far beyond the utilitarian needs of international business and into the very heart of their self-expression. It was about more than just diners and jazz. It was a feeling and ethos. At first, Kenji wanted to dismiss it, but the numbers and the raw, emotional response online told the same story. This was not a random fad. It was the symptom of a profound change in the collective spirit, a reordering of values that no economic indicator could ever hope to measure. His mind drifted back to the early 1990s, to a reporting trip he'd taken to New York during the peak of Japan's economic bubble. He remembered the city's chaotic energy, the confidence and individualism of the people he met. They were proud, yet they never seemed to demand conformity. He had found it fascinating, a land of charming contradictions, but he had never thought to probe its deeper spiritual core. Now, all these years later, that same spirit was being re-examined and embraced around the world. It wasn't just in Japan. In London, Paris, Seoul, and Sydney, a new generation was looking to America not for its economic model, but for its model of living. They were drawn to its casual openness, its celebration of the individual, its inherent optimism. This resonance didn't stem from financial might, but from a recognition of the humanity woven into its cultural fabric. Kenji felt a startling thought crystallize in his mind. Perhaps, for all these years, we had fundamentally misunderstood the true meaning of prosperity. It was unheard of for the Asahi Shimbun to treat a cultural trend with the gravity of an economic report. But the scale of the phenomenon could no longer be ignored. He looked up at Aiko, his decision made. Aiko, he said, his voice firm. I want you to get behind these numbers. Find the people. Why are young Japanese so hungry for this American spirit right now? Find the answer. He didn't know it then, but this assignment would be the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything he had believed for 30 years. It was a story about a quiet revolution, and its opening act was about to unfold on the streets of his own country. Following Kenji's directive, Aiko Sato dove headfirst into the field. Her first stop was a newly opened retro-American diner in the heart of Shibuya, Tokyo. The place was a vibrant pastiche of Americana, red vinyl booths, a gleaming chrome counter, and a jukebox in the corner crooning the soulful melodies of Etta James. The air smelled of sizzling burgers and sweet milkshakes. At a corner booth, a group of teenagers was laughing, their conversation a seamless blend of Japanese and English. That concert was awesome, one girl said, her friend nodding enthusiastically. Totally. The guitarist was just keeping it real, you know? Aiko, recording the ambient sound, approached their table. Excuse me, she began. I couldn't help but notice your English. Why do you use it so naturally with each other? One of the boys, wearing a vintage New York Yankees cap, grinned. Because it feels more direct, he explained. In Japanese, you always have to worry about politeness, about your position. English, it just lets you say what you feel. There's a kind of freedom in that. As her investigation deepened, Aiko encountered one surprising scene after another. In a small, independent bookstore in Jimbocho, she found that sections dedicated to American Beat Generation poets like Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg were constantly sold out. The store owner told her that young people were hungry for stories of rebellion, of hitting the open road, of searching for a truth outside the confines of society. In supermarkets, she saw a growing number of shoppers carrying tote bags emblazoned with slogans like "Think Different" or lyrics from Bob Dylan songs. It wasn't just Hollywood movies anymore. A deeper, more nuanced American aesthetic, one that championed authenticity and the individual, was quietly weaving its way into the fabric of daily life. Meanwhile, on the other side of the country in Fukuoka, a university's American Studies program had become so popular there was a 3-year waiting list. Peering into a classroom, Aiko saw students engaged in a heated but respectful debate about civil rights. They weren't just practicing verb conjugations. They were practicing how to form and defend an opinion. One student's words lingered with her long after she left. When I speak English, he said, I feel like I can take up more space. I don't know why, but my voice feels louder, more my own. Aiko began to form a theory. Perhaps American English wasn't just a language, but a medium that carried a different kind of social energy. If Japanese excelled at creating harmony and expressing subtle deference, American English was the tool of direct, passionate self-expression. And maybe, just maybe, that was the very medicine that the souls of young people, weary from the pressures of a highly structured and conformist society, were desperately seeking. Even more astonishing was how this Americanization of spirit was seeping into the corporate world. She visited a small, struggling precision parts manufacturer in a town outside Nagoya, a company called Asahi Tech. On the walls of the factory floor, where one would expect to see slogans about quality and efficiency, there were now brightly colored posters with phrases like "freedom to fail," "speak your mind," and "be authentic." The manager, a young man named Kenjiro Takeda, explained that he had adopted the philosophy after a brief internship at a startup in Austin, Texas. He was inspired by the flat hierarchies and the culture of open brainstorming. We're not just pursuing efficiency anymore, Takeda said with a conviction that startled Aiko. We're pursuing our team's passion. I was blown away when I saw how Americans work, the way they value every individual's crazy idea. That's the real engine of innovation. In the 3 years since implementing these changes, including Innovation Fridays, where employees worked on personal projects, productivity had jumped by 30%. More importantly, the expressions on the workers' faces had changed. They were brighter, more engaged. When Aiko relayed the story to Kenji back in Tokyo, there was a long silence on the line. Japan was learning from America. For a man like Kenji Tanaka, who had built his career documenting Japan's economic prowess and its methodical approach to management, the idea was almost incomprehensible. Yet, the videos and testimonies Aiko sent back painted a clear, undeniable picture of a new Japan emerging. That night, alone in his office, Kenji dimmed the lights and pressed play on Aiko's compiled footage. The screen filled with images that felt both foreign and deeply familiar. A truck driver with a Bruce Springsteen, Born to Run sticker on his dashboard. Factory workers in a circle, openly debating a design flaw, with the youngest member's opinion being given equal weight. A classroom of students cheering as one of their own overcame her shyness to recite a Walt Whitman poem. A quiet, melodic soundtrack of American folk music played underneath. Kenji leaned forward, taking a sharp breath. How could a nation as politically polarized and complex as America still manage to project such a powerful, unifying message of the human spirit? The question soon morphed into a certainty. This was not a simple case of cultural importation. It was a sign that something was awakening within the Japanese people themselves. A desire for the spiritual over the material, for connection over efficiency. And somehow, America, the America of poets, musicians, and garage innovators, had become the quiet symbol of this new era. The next morning, Kenji walked into the editorial meeting with a new resolve. This isn't just a story about a trend, he announced to the room of seasoned journalists. The world is quietly changing its axis, and we need to be there to witness it. In his mind's eye, he saw the New York he had visited 30 years ago. The controlled chaos, the vibrant energy, the unmistakable pride simmering beneath the surface. And now, that same warmth was starting a fire half a world away. Aiko's investigation took her deeper into the heartland of this quiet revolution. She traveled to the industrial city of Kitakyushu, a place built on steel and collective effort, to meet a man named Ryoichi Ito. He was a 58-year-old salaryman, a quintessential figure of Japan's old guard who had dedicated his life to his company. But after his 21-year-old son, a passionate fan of classic American rock, died in a sudden accident, Ryoichi's meticulously ordered world collapsed. He sealed himself off, lost in a silent grief. One day, going through his son's belongings, he found an old vinyl record player and a collection of albums by artists like Bob Dylan and Bruce Springsteen. On a whim, he put on Thunder Road. As Springsteen's raw, yearning voice filled the small apartment, something inside Ryoichi broke open. "I'm not delivering quarterly reports," he told Aiko, his voice thick with emotion, his eyes shining with a light she hadn't expected. "I'm carrying someone's dream. That's what those songs taught me." He had started learning English by translating the lyrics, finding in their stories of escape and self-discovery a way to connect with the son he had lost. "Every time I learn a new phrase," he confided, "it feels like I'm having a conversation with him." Aiko felt a knot form in her throat. Here, in this small apartment, was a power that transcended language, a force that could mend a broken heart. Next, she found herself in the sleek, glass and steel towers of Marunouchi, Tokyo's financial district. There, she met Akemi Yoshida, a high-powered vice president at a major investment bank. She had always believed that numbers were the only truth and that profit was the ultimate goal. Her life was a series of targets and transactions. But then her teenage daughter became obsessed with American slam poetry, joining a small club that held open mic nights in a basement cafe in Shimokitazawa. One evening, Akemi reluctantly went to watch. She saw her quiet, reserved daughter stand on a small stage and pour out her heart in a torrent of raw, vulnerable English words about fear, hope, and the pressure to be perfect. The family dynamic shifted overnight. "My daughter learned to be brave," Akemi told Aiko, "and I learned the value of gratitude. It may seem like a small thing, but for me, it was a revelation." The experience sparked Akemi's interest in the American concept of a purpose-driven business. She began shifting her investment portfolio away from companies focused solely on short-term gains and toward those that prioritized long-term trust, employee well-being, and a genuine corporate mission. I want to see value that remains in the heart, not just on a balance sheet, she explained. Her investment strategy underwent a radical transformation. And the results? Her new portfolio began outperforming the industry average. Back at the small-town factory, Asahi Tech, the revolution continued. The manager, Kenjiro Takeda, had fully integrated his version of the American startup ethos. Daily morning huddles replaced formal briefings. An idea board covered an entire wall, filled with suggestions from every level of the company. They even instituted a gratitudegram system where employees could write anonymous notes of thanks to one another. At first, the older, more traditional workers were bewildered. But as they began to openly share ideas and express appreciation, the atmosphere in the factory transformed. The 30% productivity increase was holding steady, and the employee turnover rate had been cut in half. One veteran machinist, a man who had worked at the factory for 40 years, spoke to Aiko with tears in his eyes. For the first time, he said, "I feel like I'm not just a pair of hands. I feel like my company is proud of me, and I'm proud of my work." The American dream, it seemed, wasn't just about wealth. It was about the dignity of the individual, and it was taking root in the unlikeliest of places. Aiko soon discovered this phenomenon was global. A Japanese professor at King's College London, Dr. Leah Clark, confirmed her findings. For years, people studied English for purely practical economic reasons, she explained over a video call. But we're seeing a massive shift. People are now learning American English for the feeling it gives them, a sense of comfort, directness, and personal freedom. In the global market of languages, this is a truly unique development. On a fresh page in her notebook, Aiko wrote, "From the age of efficiency to the age of healing, America is becoming the lighthouse, showing the way." She returned to Tokyo to present her findings to Kenji. She spread a mountain of documents across the vast conference table. The numbers were staggering. 86% of new learners of American English were under the age of 30. Videos related to American indie music, slam poetry, and cultural idioms had amassed hundreds of millions of views in Japan alone. Online sales of American-made craft goods and independent publications had grown by over 100% in a year. This was far more than a passing fascination with burgers and milkshakes. It was a revolution of the heart, happening in plain sight. Kenji looked over the data, taking a long, slow breath. "What we lost," he murmured, almost to himself. "Perhaps America still has it." A faint, uncharacteristic smile touched his lips. This phenomenon couldn't be explained with economic charts. The people in Aiko's stories weren't chasing speed or power. They were searching for something gentler, something more authentic. They were searching for freedom and a sense of self-worth. Kenji realized that the era when Japan could shake the world with its manufacturing prowess might be fading. But now, it seemed, America was shaking the world with its soul. In the main conference room of the Asahi Shimbun, Kenji spoke with a quiet authority. "This story," he declared, "is our front-page lead. The headline will be, 'The Quiet Revolution.'" The moment the words left his mouth, the atmosphere in the room shifted. An age was dawning where the economic giant, Japan, was turning to the cultural heart of America for lessons on how to live. As Kenji meticulously edited Aiko's draft, he felt the foundations of his own worldview start to crumble. He had always put his faith in numbers, in the belief that economic growth was the ultimate proof of a nation's well-being. But the story laid out before him was about an invisible, unquantifiable force, the spiritual influence of a nation that, by all political metrics, was deeply divided and troubled. Every story Aiko had gathered was a small, sharp indictment of the life he himself had led. A small-town factory, exhausted by the relentless pursuit of efficiency, had rediscovered pride. A finance executive who saw people as data points was now basing her decisions on trust. A grieving father, lost in a world of rigid duty, had found his way back to life through a song about freedom. None of these transformations could be measured in yen or dollars. Suddenly, Kenji thought of his own home. Since his daughter had moved out, The dinner table had grown silent. Conversations with his wife were clipped, revolving mostly around schedules and obligations. He couldn't remember the last time they had truly shared a laugh or a dream. When had the simple joy of being together been replaced by the logistics of cohabitation? Perhaps, he mused, the quiet grace that people in Aiko's stories were finding was hidden in plain sight, in the very daily interactions that his own culture of tireless work had taught him to overlook. He gazed out the window at the sprawling neon galaxy of the Tokyo nightscape, a profound warmth spreading through his chest. The debate in the final editorial meeting was fierce. Are we romanticizing America? One editor challenged. This story has no hard economic angle, another protested. The voices of skepticism rose, a chorus of the old guard. But Kenji remained calm. This is not an economic story, he stated, his voice cutting through the noise. This is a story about the rebirth of the human spirit. He was certain that the world was reawakening to the value of an invisible asset, the soul. Countries with soaring GDPs were reporting plummeting rates of happiness. Societies that should have felt prosperous were riddled with loneliness. In the face of this paradox, it was America, complex, flawed, and yet endlessly aspirational, that was providing a new blueprint. It was teaching the world how to live again. On a memo pad, Kenji scribbled a note for the article's preamble. America is revered today not because it is a model of flawless success, but because it is a model of relentless resilience. It is a testament to a history of overcoming immense challenges, social, political, and natural, while its people, time and again, hold their heads high and help one another forward. Aiko's words from their last conversation echoed in his mind. Their political influence may be chaotic, she had said, but the warmth in their culture is growing. Maybe the world is ready for a gentler kind of strength. Kenji nodded to himself. In looking at America, he told the hushed conference room, we are really re-examining ourselves. His voice was quiet, but it resonated with the force of a revelation, silencing all dissent. Aiko's assignment was finally over. Waiting for her flight at Haneda Airport, she opened her laptop and quietly reviewed her notes, a sprawling tapestry of voices and stories. The students learning to speak their minds. The factory workers rediscovering their pride. The father rebuilding his life around a guitar riff. The common thread in every story was a set of values she now thought of as fundamentally American. The celebration of the individual, the courage to be vulnerable, the belief in second chances. America's influence, she mused, wasn't a cultural export. It was a spiritual import. In the process of reporting the story, she realized she had changed too. Once driven by deadlines and the relentless pursuit of the next scoop, she now found herself pausing, listening more carefully to the people she interviewed, choosing her words with more intention. The American way wasn't about imitation. It was about reawakening a kindness and an authenticity that already existed within her. Boarding the short flight back to Tokyo, she noticed a young man in the adjacent seat, deeply engrossed in a small book of poetry. The cover read, Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman. Aiko smiled softly. This change was unstoppable. It was a quiet, powerful tide, rising all around her. When I get back, she vowed silently, I'll tell Kenji. This isn't a trend. It's a pilgrimage. The people of Japan are making a journey to America, and they are making it in their hearts. She closed her eyes, feeling a palpable shift within herself. Something new had taken root. The front page of the Asahi Shimbun was dominated by a single, bold headline, The Quiet Revolution, When Japan Awakens to the American Soul. It was the first time the esteemed financial paper had ever dedicated its lead story to a matter of the heart. In the days that followed, the story went viral. Media outlets across the globe, from the BBC to Le Monde, picked it up, sparking a worldwide conversation. The phrase, America is shaking the world again, spread across social media, but this time, it wasn't in reference to a tech innovation or a military intervention. The America the world was celebrating was a nation of quiet strength and gentle values. The story of Ryuichi Ito, the grieving salaryman, moved millions. His quote, "I'm not delivering quarterly reports, I'm carrying someone's dream," became a viral sensation, challenging the very definition of work for a generation. The comment sections were flooded with emotional responses. "I cried reading that," and "I want to be proud of my job, too." The ripple soon reached the highest levels of corporate and educational life. The CEO of a major Japanese electronics firm, in a letter to shareholders, wrote, "In our pursuit of efficiency, we may have forgotten the human heart. From now on, we will learn from the American spirit of craftsmanship and pour our souls into our products." Soon, major corporations in automotive, retail, and even food service began introducing, American-style, initiatives focused on employee empowerment and purpose. It was not a superficial business tactic, it was a movement to recenter the human being at the core of the enterprise. The American ethos was quietly rewiring the spiritual DNA of the world's third-largest economy. From his office window, Kenji Tanaka watched the city below, a quiet sense of awe washing over him. The scenes he had witnessed in New York 30 years ago, the casual politeness, the silent dignity of people at work, the undercurrent of mutual respect, what had once seemed unremarkable now felt profound. America wasn't shaking the world with its power, he thought. It was guiding it with its heart. That idea, once so foreign, now felt like an undeniable truth. Aiko, too, felt the change in her own life. After internalizing the American work style she had reported on, less about frantic haste, more about mindful presence, her own behavior softened. She made a point to truly listen when colleagues spoke. At home, she began a new tradition of sharing one good thing about her day with her parents over dinner. They were small gestures, but each one brought a palpable warmth into her life. Weeks after the article's publication, the newsroom was inundated with thousands of letters from readers. "My son and I started saying thank you to each other at the dinner table. My husband and I cleaned out the garage together for the first time in years. I want to find a job that values my soul, not just my output." They weren't responses to an economic analysis. They were letters of gratitude from people whose lives had been touched. Kenji picked up one letter in particular. The sender was Ryuichi Ito. "The sadness of losing my son will never disappear," he wrote. "But the American idea of living in the moment, of making it count, that has saved me. Your article changed my life." As Kenji read the words, his eyes welled with tears. He looked over at Aiko, his voice soft but clear. "This isn't a fleeting moment," he said. "The world is learning to feel again." Later, for a follow-up column, he wrote the final paragraph. "True strength is not found in shouting the loudest, but in the quiet empathy we show to one another. In that gentleness lies the future." What America has taught us is not a lesson in efficiency or victory, but in the simple, profound culture of mutual understanding. It is the oldest and newest power on earth, and the world is finally trying to remember its way back home.